Alright, calm down, I get it. God of War is a lot of people's favorite game of all time. I'd come in pissed too if someone called Red Dead Redemption 2 overrated in their thumbnail, I get it. But hear me out. Is God of War overrated? Yeah, it's incredibly overrated. It's definitely a good game, I'm not calling it bad at all, but is it the greatest game of all time? Hells to the no! I feel like this game has lots of glaring issues that people just overlook because of how great it can be at times, which is definitely understandable. But that doesn't erase those issues. And truly one of my favorite videos on YouTube is Dardigan's Everything Wrong with Red Dead Redemption 2 video because he brings up a lot of very interesting points on my favorite game. I don't agree with a lot of them, but it's nice to not be in an echo chamber of Red Dead circle jerking and see other people's perspectives. So all I ask going forward is that you hear me out, and now let's get into this review of God of War 2018. This did come out like 5.5 years ago, so there will be spoilers, but I will mention a few things in its sequel, God of War Ragnarok, that are small spoilers. I'll start off with the gameplay, which is done well overall, but does have some issues here and there, mainly at the start. In the beginning, the combat can get extremely repetitive, shown in literally the first boss. Your axe throw does less damage on the troll and takes longer to execute than your swings, making the fight essentially boil down to hit, dodge over and over. On the base difficulty, this boss provides a little to no challenge, while also having way too much health to not be boring. I will get into bosses more in depth in a minute, but I'm really hammering this one home because it represents basic combat encounters more than it does the boss fights. At the beginning, it really boils down to just a few different combos being executed over and over until you run out of enemies or something cool happens. The combat does improve much more the further you progress, as you unlock more skills, as Atreus becomes, an asset, and you unlock some rad new or rather old weapons. As a side note though, it is worth mentioning that you do get reset a bit once you gain the Blades of Chaos. You're super excited to use them, but once again, you have no skills unlocked and you basically do the same 3 moves over and over. This is further driven home when you immediately go on one of this game's many sidetracks and end up in Helheim where your axe is rendered useless. I do like the additions of the blades though, as they're used more for crowd control while the axe is better suited for individual targets. The 3 combat forms of the Leviathan axe, Blades of Chaos, and hand-to-hand do provide a nice amount of variety, but I always forget about using fists to be honest. And a majority of the time, you have to use one or the other. It really makes me miss the variety and exhilarating gameplay of the Draupnir Spear from Ragnarok. Going back to how tedious the combat can be, that point is further proven with the finishers. They are really cool animations. It was so exhilarating and adrenaline pumping when I grabbed that Draugr and ripped its chest open for the first time, and then it was cool when I grabbed a Draugr and ripped its chest open a second time, and then it happened a third time, and a fourth, and then I realized, oh wow, I'm gonna see this all game with this type of enemy. As you discover more and more enemy types, you do see more finishers, but there's only one per enemy, or at least it feels that way. In Doom Eternal, one of the best action games I've ever played, every single enemy has a bunch of different glory kill animations based on its positioning and angle relative to you. In God of War, it might be the same. I feel like I did get a different animation when I killed them from behind, but it never happens. The reason why you see all those different animations in Doom Eternal is because that game's combat is heavily reliant on movement. If you aren't constantly dashing around and swinging on shit, it's over for you. But in God of War, you are glued to the floor and enemies are always facing you. Yeah, there might be a different animation if you hit R3 from behind the enemy, but that doesn't matter if the enemy is always facing you. This game does have a wide variety of runic attacks, activated by holding L1 and pressing R1 or R2. These attacks are incredibly fun and are really good for wiping out multiple enemies at once, or focusing on one individual enemy, while inflicting elemental damage. I especially like how these runic attacks can be chosen to complement your build. Like, if you love the runic attacks you've picked, but they take too long to recharge, you can select different enchantments and armor pieces to buff the cooldown stat. And since I mentioned it, the armors and upgrade systems are cool. My only complaint is that some armors look exactly the same, so they're constantly pushing these dog-ass, ugly fucking sleeves on me. The most obvious and interesting addition to God of War's combat is definitely Spartan Rage. I do think it's a very useful mechanic, especially with how each hit you land restores a bit of HP. It unfortunately has the exact same issue that the rest of the combat has, where it is incredibly monotonous and only really shines when you've upgraded the majority of the skill tree in the later stages of the game. It's honestly a bit of a downer because you unlock it in the middle of this crazy and intense fight against Baldur, and you see the prompt, and you get even more hyped, and then you start laying into him, only to realize seconds later that all you can do is mash R1 and press R2. It's so bare bones at the beginning, and it doesn't even need to be that complex. Not only is Spartan Rage a tactical advantage, but in the late game, it's really fun to ground stomp with L1, throw a huge chunk of the ground with L2, and use other situational moves unlocked in the skill tree. One of the biggest issues this game's combat has is that it really only ramps up exponentially in the last act. Towards the middle, when you've only been using the same few moves for a while, and you're in the worst part of the plot riddled with backtracking, which, believe me, we'll get into later, I really wouldn't be surprised if you got discouraged and didn't pick the game up again. The combat in this game does have small features that really stand out and are just neat additions. Like how strongly throwing the axe freezes the enemy in place, but especially how the environment changes in fights. Like how trees will break when you hit them or knock the enemy into them. One thing I think they missed out on in retrospect is having a possible Ghost of Tsushima or Arkham-style fear system. Listen, Kratos is absolutely terrifying. When Baldur first showed up and was pushing his buttons, I was shitting a brick, thinking that he didn't know who he was messing with. And I would have liked to see that intimidation in the gameplay itself. Like, maybe when you face larger hordes of grunts and they see you rip one of their allies apart or activate Spartan Rage, they freak out a little and drop their weapons or something. Then they snap out of it after a second and have to pick them back up again. Maybe that would be lame in gameplay. I know I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Trust me, you guys made that very clear in my Armored Core 6 review. Message received. But still, I think that would have been an interesting addition. Far and away, one of my biggest issues with God of War's gameplay is the Fogression system. If you don't know what that is, basically Fogression is a system where you do get stronger and your stats get higher, but so do the enemies, robbing the player of that feeling of power. In God of War, Kratos gets strong enough to kill the Valkyrie Queen, but now Draugr and Trolls have a 6 next to their health bar, and it's just as difficult to fight as they were in the beginning. I do understand how mowing through the enemies could get annoying, as they'd just be a quick time waster the game throws at you on your way to an objective. However, the word of the day today is apparently tedium, and it sure as hell does get tedious fighting the same type of enemy over and over, with no sense of strength relative to them. I feel like if they didn't level up with you, it would also provide a better experience with the oh shit moments. It would be so much more intimidating if you were used to these cannon fodder enemies, then went to Helheim to get that guy's heart, and were faced with what this game seems to be allergic to. On top of that, you could make the open world feel much more free. Like, yeah, you can go to Tears Vault early, but since the enemies there are much harder than the enemies in the woods, the player is more inclined to go on the path the devs have planned for them. Of course, though, that couldn't work in this game, since you're constantly rubber banding around the map with some half-baked excuse that the plot comes up with. The majority of the problems I have with this game's combat are soothed by the incredible boss fights, and the sick shots they provide. Honestly, having an enemy to fight that doesn't go down in 2 hits is really refreshing, and while it isn't always the most challenging, seeing 2 titans clash is always fun. On top of that, they have really creative concepts that are executed very well, like how you fight Magni and Modi at the same time, and how you have to block their attacks and their tornadoes, sometimes faking you out. Even when you're fighting someone for the second time, it isn't just a rehash of the first fight. There's a clear difference between this Baldur fight and this Baldur fight. And that's not to say that the first one isn't good because it's outdone by the last. They both fit in where they are incredibly well given their contexts, even if one is blown out of the water by the other one. The fights always feel real, with every hit landed feeling canonical no matter how disrespectful. And anything that lets me see something like this is fantastic in my book. I did notice a problem with the boss fights though, which is that the audio balancing is a bit off at times. The music is fine in other moments, like when you spread the ashes, but I think it's definitely too quiet in boss fights. This can be fixed by messing around with the audio settings, but on default, it's kind of jarring that you don't notice the music for a bit, and then when you do, it's mainly because it's a bit out of place given the volume. But the score in general is really well done. I mean, not Woody Jackson well done, but still, you can't help but be overwhelmed with emotion when this long journey climaxes with Kratos shedding his bandages, accentuated by this beautiful music. God of War's open world is a pretty mixed bag. I do like how it changes and evolves as you play through certain story beats, like Kratos and Baldur creating a gorge or the World Serpent Rising, and it is pretty interesting how it's divided into different realms. That divisiveness, however, isn't flawless. It is incredibly disappointing to discover that there are 4 other explorable realms, but 2 of them are gimmicks, and the other 2 are almost only there to serve big setbacks in the story. Niflheim and Muspelheim are unlocked by obtaining certain collectibles, so it's not like you access them the same way you do the other realms. But I feel like it sets your expectations too high. Like, hell yeah, dude, you get 2 more realms to explore. They're really cool too, like how there's only one thing to do in each of them, and like, It honestly just feels like they had these bonus game modes they wanted to include, and decided to use the other realms as window dressing to make them seem cooler than they are. Even in Midgard, Helheim, and Alfheim though, I do have issues with the open world. The Lake of Nine is really cool and is a great main hub, but that's the most explorable part of the entire game, and you're probably going to spend most of your time there. Like, it has the most clearly advertised and appealing side content in Midgard. Who the fuck wants to climb that mountain again? But the rest of the map isn't really revisited properly. In Red Dead 2, you do a mission near Rhodes because you're camped near there. Then the Pinkertons show up, so you go on your way to Saint Denis and set up camp. Then you go into town to scope things out and learn about who runs the town. Every place you go is clearly justified and explained in its mission. In this game, I want to climb a mountain in Jotunheim, so I go to Helheim twice. I just don't feel like all of this rubber banding around the map is justified well enough in its plot due to how extremely inconvenient it is. And negative emotion or even poor level design can be a good thing. I know that sounds like I got hit with the stupid stick, but take The Last of Us. The first time I played it, I was really bad at the combat and struggled and grinded through every combat encounter, just barely scraping by. I could only play for so long before I got so exhausted that I had to stop. But as soon as I turned the game off, I immediately wanted to start playing it again, because I was so invested in the story. That game takes place in an apocalypse. Life in it is difficult, painful, and exhausting, and having a hard time making it through missions immersed me into that world even further. But nothing in God of War's Nordic world is as inherently obnoxious as running into random black mist or going to the wrong mountain. One of the most important aspects of video games to me personally is the characters. Why on earth would I ever give a fuck about saving these teens and getting them to survive until dawn if I don't like them? And one of the best parts of God of War is that I swear the writers could teach a masterclass on how to write characters this well. I do think that the dialogue, while mostly well written and properly nuanced, can be a bit heavy-handed. For example, I'm not sure if you noticed, but Baldur cannot actually feel anything, in case you missed the first couple of times he blatantly said it during your first encounter with him, in the first half hour of the game or so.
I can't feel any of this. I feel nothing. I feel nothing. I'd hope that you, of everyone I'd faced, would finally make me feel something, but you can't.
I do have another problem with the dialogue, but it's specific to one character, so I'll get into the characters themselves and bring that up at the end. I want to preface this by saying that I have not played any other God of War game besides 2018 and Ragnarok. My only experience with the trilogy is that I'm familiar with the lore and have seen a good amount of cutscenes. So from my limited point of view, Kratos seems to be a vengeful vehicle for the player to have a power trip in the Greek saga of games. He seems incredibly one-dimensional and flat. Yes, he was tricked by the gods into killing his wife and daughter, which is a sensible motivation, but there doesn't seem to be anything else there. I could be wrong, but across the trilogy, he doesn't seem to evolve at all. He does, however, have one of the best redemptive arcs I've ever seen in this new Nordic series. It does definitely continue into Ragnarok, but even just limiting it to the 2018 game, hot damn, this arc is written beautifully. When I had just first started playing this game for the first time back in 2020, I was not a fan of Kratos. I didn't know much about him, and he starts off as a very shitty father. One of the worst and most infuriating lessons he teaches his son is for him to close his heart to the suffering of others. He is very aggressive to Atreus and is always hesitant to even put his hand on his shoulder. But over the course of the game, he becomes much more expressive and trusting of his son. He bonds with him over millennia-old alcohol from his homeland, and at the end, lets him carry his mother's ashes through the final stretch of the climb. Redemption stories are some of my favorites, and Kratos definitely has one of the best I've ever experienced in gaming. I mean, he still holds on to being unbothered by other people's suffering, but you know, he can grow past that later. You win some, you lose some. Atreus' arc is a little heavy-handed in my opinion. He goes through like all of the mood swings of pubescence in like 2 play hours after learning he's a god, but I do like how he's written to have the same perspective we have.
What are we hunting?
You are hunting deer.
Which way?
In the direction of deer.
Okay.
Atreus' arc of understanding what it means to be a god is very well done, and his arc of becoming ready for what lies ahead and being able to hold his own is really highlighted when you watch him kill Modi, and remember just how rattled he was by killing someone at the beginning of the game, and being that close to his corpse. Another change in his character that I love is how, when he's in his angsty era, he's nagging Kratos about information, like how he knows the consequences of killing a god. But once he gets dragged down back to Earth, and sees his father killing Zeus in Helheim, he acts like he didn't see anything, as he knows that he doesn't understand the context of what he saw. The majority of his character writing is leading up to this sequel though, like how it's revealed that he's Loki. One of my biggest problems regarding this though is in the climax, during one of the best scenes in the game. My opinion of God of War Ragnarok has lowered just a teensy bit because when Kratos tells Atreus about his past in Greece, they say this.
Is this how it always ends? Sons killing their mothers? Their fathers?
No. We will be the gods we choose to be. Not those who have been. Who I was is not who you will be.
I really wish that sentiment of who I was is not who you will be was challenged in Ragnarok and was part of Atreus' struggle with the identity of Loki. To be fair though, Atreus does have one of the hardest lines in this game.
Not my blood.
Freya's dynamic with Kratos is one of my favorites, especially as it extends into the sequel, but as it stands in the 2018 game, it is really interesting to see her win the trust of a very skeptical Kratos, only for her to feel betrayed by him killing her son. I love her dialogue with Atreus and how eager she is to help him when he gets sick, but at the same time, her dialogue in the scene with the mistletoe arrows is a little forced. I mean, it makes sense given the fact that it's the only thing that can break the spell she put on her son, but it is not subtle. And speaking of, her relationship with Baldur is pretty heartbreaking. It follows the idea that one often meets their destiny on the path they take to avoid it. And it's all out of love. She knew Baldur would die a needless death and did everything she could to prevent that, to the point of ruining his life, and was willing to die by his hand to make things right by him. It is kinda all her fault, but she just wanted to protect him, even to the point of controlling a giant's corpse just to stop the fighting. And to quickly get into Baldur's writing, his resentment towards his mother, while justified, is hard to see. You get where he's coming from, but over the course of the game, you grow fond of Freya and don't want to see her die. I do like how everything tracks with Baldur's personality, as being invulnerable at the cost of not feeling anything for thousands of years would make you very cocky and also very miserable. Although he does receive one of the biggest indignities I've ever seen, that being how he gets completely comboed by these two. The Holdra brothers are mainly there for comedic relief, but I really like Sindri's arc across this duology and think he's really funny. Obviously, his hatred of germs is funny, but one of my favorite things about him is how he stands on business. He squared up to Kratos when he saw him carrying Faye's axe. That is my guy right there. I love Sindri. I fucking hate Brock. Listen, I know I can be crass. In my Jedi Survivor video, I joked about this squid guy putting one of his tentacles in my butt. However, Brock is crass on another level that's just obnoxious. The dumbass edgelords who write Has-Been Hotel would love Brock. Him talking about his scrote is a great first impression. And you remember how I said I have a problem with the dialogue that's specific to one character? Yeah, well, Brock's main purpose is to ruin dramatic or emotional moments with stupid jokes. They took the Disney Channel MCU approach of having something cool happen, and then Brock comes in and says, "Okay, that just happened." Like, come on, dude, after all this time and effort, I'm finally at the mountain where Kratos is gonna spread the ashes of his recently deceased wife with his son in one of the most emotionally moving finales I've ever seen, and you talk about Sif's tits. The only reason I care about him is because of the Holdra brothers story in the sequel. But as God of War 2018 stands on its own, I only like him because I'm a sucker for seeing two siblings putting their differences aside. Okay, so now we're in the story section of the video, and I'm basically going to give you the Cliff Notes version as it'll get my point across more clearly and won't take nearly as long. But it is still a bit of a doozy, so strap in, dude, and let's get into this. After shit went down in Greece and an entire pantheon was slaughtered, Kratos is now a changed man and a father, living in the Norse mythology. He had a wife named Faye who was a giant, but she's dead, so now he's stuck with this snot-nosed named Atreus. But that doesn't matter because he's mostly just called Boy. Kratos is a very shitty father, we can assume Faye did all the parenting, but I will say that this game kind of emulates Joel and Ellie's relationship, where it seems like he was just kind of dropped onto Kratos, but this kid's like 8. He's known Kratos his whole life. Anyways, they chop down trees that Faye marked for her funeral pyre, they burn her body, and plan to take her ashes to the highest peak in all the realms. Atreus has a hissy fit, Kratos thinks he isn't strong enough yet after being sick, and now says, "We are not going to the mountain right now." But then this guy shows up, fights Kratos and loses, but not without kicking the shit out of him, and then Kratos says, "We are going to the mountain right now." The reason why is because that guy is the god Baldur, Odin's son, and Odin has a hate rager for the giants, so he sends Baldur to go look for Faye. But there's a protective stave around Kratos' house, but one of the trees that Faye marked and Kratos cut down was an anchor point for the stave, so now it's broken, and Baldur can jump her. So now they're on the way to the mountain, they hunt a magical boar, this witch lady finds out and is really mad at them because she loves animals and lives under a big turtle. She turns out to be Odin's ex-wife Freya and is the mother of Baldur, and so she recognizes that Kratos is a god, but Atreus doesn't know that yet, and also doesn't know that he is a part god yet either. So they help her heal the boar, she puts a sigil on them that hides them from the Aesir gods. They continue up the mountain and experience Morning Breath. Freya shows up and says, yeah, you guys can fuck off to a whole nother realm and pad the runtime, because the only way you're getting through that black fog is with the light of Alfheim. So they fuck off to a whole nother realm and pad the runtime so they can get the light of Alfheim and get through the black fog, and when they get there, Kratos steps into this big beam of light and inadvertently leaves Atreus to fend for himself for hours. He gets fed up, pulls Kratos out, and is rightfully pissed. Kratos apologizes in his own way, and they get back up the mountain and go through the fog. So then they reach the peak and overhear Baldur talking with someone alongside Thor's sons Magni and Modi. The guy they're talking to says he doesn't know anything, they leave, and then Kratos pops up and sees who they were talking to. It was this guy, Mimir, who was a god and was Odin's advisor turned enemy, who Odin trapped in an impenetrable tree and tortures daily. Atreus tells him their goal of spreading the ashes like his mom asked, and Mimir says, yeah, you guys can fuck off to a whole nother realm and pad the runtime, because this isn't the highest peak in all the realms, that's in Jotunheim. And Jotunheim is impossible to get to, except I know how to get there because there actually are a few ways to get there, and it's not impossible. So since they can't get him out of the tree, they cut his head off and go, back to the witch's house. That's gonna be a theme here, and she reanimates Mimir's head, and he outs her as Freya. They need to get to Tyr's treasury to get to Jotunheim, but can't because there's a magical seal on the door. So they fuck off to a dead sculptor giant's corpse to pad the runtime, cut off part of his chisel, and are attacked by Magni and Modi. Kratos kills Magni, Modi runs away, and they go back to Tyr's treasury. They open the door to the treasury so they can finally get what they need and go to Jotunheim. But then in a moment that lasts like a minute and a half, Modi jumps them, Atreus has a Spartan rage moment and passes out, becoming sick again, and Modi runs away again. You know what that means. Back to the witch's house! In a plot point that I think is kinda lame, it turns out Atreus is sick because he doesn't know that he's a god. Huh. Anyways, Freya says, yeah, you can fuck off to a whole nother realm and pad the runtime, because the only way to heal this kid is with the heart of some guy in Helheim. But before you can even do that, everyone there is icy, so go get the Blades of Chaos because your axe won't do shit. So he goes and gets the blades, kills the dude, and then it's back to the witch's house, where she heals Atreus. And on their way out, Kratos tells Atreus that he's a god, but not how red his history is. So they go to Tyr's temple to get what they need, but a fucking vine wipes off the sigil that hides them from the gods. So they go back up the fucking mountain to where Mimir's tree body is, and on the way, Atreus kills a weakened Modi because he's an arrogant shit after finding out he's a god. So they get back to the top of the mountain. They open up the portal of Jotunheim and are ready to spread the ashes. Oh shit, the fucking vine, they found them, Baldur's jumping! Okay, this shouldn't be a big deal, just kill— No, Kratos, what are you doing?
Oh, we were right there, man!
So in one of the sorriest excuses I've ever seen to extend a game's length, our protagonist needlessly and blatantly gets in his own way. Great! They fight, end up in Tyr's travel room, and all three, or four of them, get stuck in Helheim again. The two make up and find out that Baldur hates his mom because it was foretold that Baldur would die a needless death, which would start Ragnarok. Being a mother, she made him invulnerable so that he couldn't die. But with that, he can't feel anything at all, and he ends up resenting her to the point of wanting to kill her. They make it out of Helheim and realize that there's another way to Jotun— Oh fuck, Mimir says that won't work. Oh shit, there's another way! So basically Mimir's eyes can work like a realm travel rune, but Odin plucked one of those away and hid it in a statue of Thor. So Mimir says, yeah, you can go fuck off and pad the runtime because we gotta go inside the snake— Oh fuck, I forgot about the snake. Okay, they met a big snake earlier and they gotta go inside him, and the justification is that he hates Thor and was so petty that he ate rock and swallowed the Thor statue. So they sail inside him, find the statue, find the eye, plop it into Mimir's head, and then get burped up. The reason why they got burped up is because Baldur was kicking the snake's ass because he wanted to lure the two out. They fight, Freya comes in and tries to protect Baldur, who just so happens to punch Atreus on the mistletoe part of his quiver strap, which is his weakness and breaks the invulnerability spell. They fight, Baldur tries to kill Freya, and then Kratos says,
The cycle ends here. Must be better than this.
And snaps his neck. Listen, I get what you're going for, but out of context, it's a little contradictory, man. Freya hates them now, Kratos tells Atreus about his dark past, and then they finally go to Jotunheim. They spread the ashes, learn that this was Faye's wish because the giants predicted this, and she wanted them to learn about her and the giants. We find out the giants called Atreus Loki, which was an amazing twist, and then we learn Kratos dies? So you can see why this plot frustrates me, right? Shout out Wikipedia, because this plot is so fucked up that I forgot a lot about it and had to look at their recap. I really do think that this game has great ideas and executes a lot of them very well, but really drops the ball for others. Like, I love how Kratos' old life, where he killed his family and was the Greek pantheon's monster, is symbolized by the Blades of Chaos. And those blades are the only thing that can save his new family. And Kratos releasing the bandages that covered up the markings of his old life is him letting go of that guilt, and moving forward to honor his wife's final wish and be a proper father for his son. But to get to great moments like that, you have to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's never as simple as completing your goal. You always have to go do something first that you're ready to even try to begin working towards that goal. And then, when you're at the finish line, you take it and throw it off a cliff. It's comparable to the Resident Evil games, where you can never just walk into a room. No, you have to go up to the next floor, find a cog, fit the cog into a puzzle, and then solve the puzzle so you can get the key that unlocks that door. The difference being that you can get Resident Evil 2's Platinum Trophy faster than you can beat God of War's base story. All of these setbacks and sidetracks lead me to think that when they were writing this game's story, they laid out key cool moments first, with the general plot idea, and then bent and shaped the plot around, so they could force these moments to fit. Like, they started with the idea of going inside that snake. But how can we make that happen? I don't know. Make the snake eat the Thor statue for pettiness' sake. And I genuinely believe that's the case, that they carved the plot around these set pieces, and here's why.
Somebody just called the serpent.
So this put the fan base into a frenzy, asking and theorizing who blew the horn. We expected to get the answer in Ragnarok, but we never did. But I believe that there is no answer. The writers don't even know who blew the horn, because right after this, you float down the river to your home to get the blades. And for that, the river path had to be clear. They needed the tides to fall. They had the idea to take the boat to your house and talk to Athena, and they needed the tide to fall to do that. The only way that can happen is for someone to call the snake. But who? Everyone it could be is accounted for, and we didn't find out in Ragnarok. So there's no clear answer, because there is no answer. I genuinely believe that, like this, there are so many setbacks in this game's plot because they warped it around cool moments they felt they needed to include, which I feel is honestly for the worse. God of War 2018 has very bold concepts and was created by very ambitious people, which can be its own worst enemy at times. I honestly feel like that's the mission statement of this game. Have fantastic ideas and concepts that are executed well most of the time, but are bogged down and buried tremendously by the times they fail. And that applies across the board, whether it be story, gameplay, writing, whatever. I could definitely see newcomers dropping the game after seeing how tedious and repetitive it can be in the beginning, and after reaching the 63rd setback, which is roughly 7% through the game. But once you finally reach the end and spread those ashes and have all those questions answered with new ones popping up, all you'll be thinking is that it was worth it. I give God of War 2018 an 8 out of 10, and I'm still pissed off that it beat Red Dead 2 for Game of the Year, so it's actually 0 out of 10 and worse than the dirt beneath my feet. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this video might be a bit controversial because I'm saying that this game isn't the greatest thing to ever happen in human history, but I hope you can at least see where I'm coming from, even if you don't agree with me, and that you enjoyed watching. If you did, a thumbs up would be appreciated. It really helps me out. Let me know what you thought of the video or what you think of 2018's God of War, and with that, thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.